You're fined $500 for unauthorized fishing.
I'm holding my coffee, standing on the dock I built 30 years ago, and this woman is writing me a ticket for catching bass from my own lake. The smell of cedar and morning mist suddenly feels like evidence against me.
Lady, I've been fishing here since before you were born.
Not anymore, Mr. Mills. New rules. Deal with it.
Deal with it. Meredith Blackstone moved here 6 months ago and decided everything we've done for decades is suddenly wrong. She's got her lawyer talk, her Tesla, her HOA rulebook. What she doesn't know is that I own the water rights to this entire lake. Every drop that keeps her million-dollar community afloat. Let's see how calm she stays when I pull the plug. What would you do if your HOA declared war on your traditions? Drop your horror story below. My name is Garrett Mills, and I've been living at this lake cabin since 1994. Bought it for $89,000 with my late wife Dorothy, just a simple 2-bedroom log place where we could fish and watch the sunset. Dorothy used to say the smell of cedar logs warming in the morning sun was better than any fancy perfume. When Dorothy passed 3 years ago, those sunrise fishing trips became my lifeline. The sound of coffee percolating on the old propane stove, water lapping against dock pilings, the weight of my favorite rod in arthritic hands, it kept me connected to her memory and my sanity. But everything changed when the money moved in. What used to be a blue-collar fishing community became a playground for tech executives and Seattle lawyers. The Henderson's cabin, bulldozed for an $800,000 glass monstrosity. The Martinez A-frame, replaced by some investment banker's weekend palace that lit up the lake like a shopping mall. Then 18 months ago, Meredith Blackstone arrived. She paid $1 million cash for a $650,000 lot, demolished the existing cabin, and built something that looked like it fell off a spaceship. But buying the biggest house wasn't enough. Within 3 months, she was HOA president, running on community improvement, code for getting rid of us original residents. Her systematic campaign started immediately. Harold Epstein, 78, Purple Heart recipient, got hit first. His crime? Too many hummingbird feeders. 12 feeders apparently constituted excessive wildlife attraction. $400 fine. The man who survived Normandy was being harassed over bird food. Rosa Martinez came next. Her family's vegetable garden, 3 generations of carefully tended tomatoes and peppers, suddenly violated landscape compliance standards. $600 fine for growing food on her own property. Frank Lucy, retired postal worker, got dinged for parking his 15-year-old pickup in his own driveway. Non-conforming vehicle aesthetic standards, $300 fine. Every violation notice had 2 things in common. It targeted original residents, and it came with fees designed to drain our fixed incomes. But here's the really clever part. None of us got proper meeting notifications. Harold missed the email about fishing restrictions. Rosa wasn't informed about the garden ban. I never received notice about the boat motor limits that made my 40-horsepower engine illegal. Somehow the notification system worked perfectly for newcomers but mysteriously failed whenever longtime residents needed to defend ourselves. Pure coincidence, according to Meredith. The morning she hit me with that $500 fishing fine, everything clicked. This wasn't about community standards. It was ethnic and economic cleansing, one bogus violation at a time. Force out the working-class families so her developer friends could build their luxury paradise. I spent that afternoon at the county recorder's office, pulling every document related to my property purchase. 30 years of paperwork, surveys, easements, and legal descriptions. Most of it was routine stuff, property lines, mineral rights, standard homeowner protections. But buried in the original 1994 deed was something interesting. Something about water rights and riparian access that I'd never paid attention to because, hell, I was just an electrician who wanted to fish. That night, I called my old friend Buck Morrison, retired Army Corps of Engineers who'd helped design half the dams in this county. We went over those documents with a fine-tooth comb, cross-referenced them with state water regulations and historical surveys. What we found changed everything. See, Meredith made one crucial mistake when she declared war on the original residents. She assumed we were just a bunch of uneducated blue-collar folks who'd roll over when faced with legal pressure and financial harassment. She never considered that some of us might actually own things that matter, important things. Things that could shut down her entire gentrification project with the turn of a valve. The smell of old paper and legal ink in that recorder's office reminded me of something Dorothy used to say. Garrett, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You just have to pay attention when everyone else is talking. Time to see how smart Meredith really was. The second fine arrived exactly 1 week later. Certified mail, return receipt requested. Meredith's favorite way of making sure her legal harassment felt official. This time, $750 for dock safety violations and non-compliance with updated waterfront standards. Apparently, my 30-year-old wooden dock didn't meet the HOA's new liability requirements. The notice included a professional inspection report citing inadequate railing height, non-conforming decking materials, and, my personal favorite, failure to display current liability insurance documentation. For a dock I built myself on my own property. The inspection signature made my blood run cold. Tucker Blackstone, certified building inspector for Riverside County. Same last name wasn't a coincidence. A quick Google search confirmed what I suspected. Tucker was Meredith's brother-in-law, and he'd been conducting voluntary safety assessments for concerned HOA residents all summer. This was a family business, and I was the product being sold. That morning, I did what any retired electrician does when facing a wiring problem. I traced the circuit back to find the main breaker, hours at the county recorder's office, pulling documents I should have studied years ago. My 1994 purchase agreement, the original lake covenants, every legal scrap that might matter. What I found reminded me of something my old foreman used to say. Most people don't read the fine print until the power goes out. My property predated the HOA incorporation by 7 years. The original deed included riparian water rights in perpetuity, fancy legal language that meant I owned access to the lake water itself, not just my shoreline. Back when I signed those papers, I figured it was just lawyer talk about fishing rights. Turns out it meant a hell of a lot more than that. I remembered a case from my union days where a developer tried to force out longtime residents by claiming grandfathered rights didn't matter. The residents won because their property ownership predated the new authority trying to control them. Same principle here. Meredith's HOA rules couldn't override rights I'd held for decades. That afternoon, I drove to Beth Kowalski's house. Beth was a retired paralegal who'd been hit with a $400 fine for inappropriate garden decorations, 3 ceramic gnomes her late husband had given her. If anyone could help me decode legal documents, it was her. "Garrett," she said, spreading my papers across her dining table, "I've been wondering when you'd show up. Half the original families are getting these harassment notices." Her legal eye caught something mine had missed. A clause in the original lake covenant that made my spine tingle. Primary riparian rights holder maintains authority over water access and usage for all community members. Primary riparian rights holder. That was me. "Sweet Jesus," Beth whispered. "Do you understand what this means?" I was starting to, but first, I needed insurance against whatever Meredith tried next. That evening, I installed security cameras pointed at my dock. Nothing fancy, just basic surveillance that would record any unwanted visitors. The whir of the camera motor tracking movement sounded like electronic protection, a red LED blinking steadily in the darkness like a warning light. The next morning brought Meredith herself, clicking across my wooden dock in designer heels at 7:30 a.m., iPad in hand, photographing every supposed violation. She didn't notice the camera capturing her trespassing. "Mr. Mills," she called out as I sat with my coffee and fishing rod, "I need to discuss your compliance timeline." "Morning, Meredith. Nice day for breaking and entering." Her stylus paused over the tablet. "This is official HOA business. I have every right to inspect waterfront safety conditions. Actually, you don't. But please, keep documenting yourself committing crimes on camera." The confidence drained from her face for just a moment, long enough for me to see that maybe she hadn't researched quite as thoroughly as she thought. But here's where Meredith surprised me. Instead of backing down, she doubled down. 2 days later, Frank Lucy's daughter brought me a copy of an emergency HOA agenda she'd printed at work. Emergency Resolution 2024-07. All waterfront property owners must carry minimum $1 million liability insurance for dock usage, effective immediately. The annual cost? $3,400, a number precisely calculated to bankrupt anyone living on Social Security. The meeting was scheduled for Tuesday at 2 p.m., work hours when blue-collar folks couldn't attend. No notification sent to me, Harold, Rosa, or any other problem residents. But as I stood on my dock that evening, watching the last light fade over water I'd fished for 30 years, I realized Meredith had just made her first real mistake. She'd moved from harassment to extortion, and she'd done it in writing. The smell of lake water and approaching rain mixed with something else: opportunity. Time to show this fancy lawyer what happens when you try to foreclose on a man who holds the deed to your entire world. Meredith wasn't finished. If anything, my legal challenge seemed to wake up something vicious in her. The following Monday brought a parade of government inspectors to my property like some bureaucratic nightmare: county zoning, state environmental agency, fish and wildlife department, all responding to anonymous complaints about my dock, my boat, my very existence. The sound of measuring tapes snapping and citation forms scratching became my new alarm clock. Each inspector carried clipboards and cameras, documenting every nail and board like they were building a criminal case. "Sir, we're investigating reports of environmental contamination," said the wildlife officer, measuring my 20-year-old fish cleaning station. "Someone claims you've been dumping waste directly into the lake." The same cleaning table Dorothy and I had used for Sunday fish fries was suddenly an environmental hazard. Professional, thorough, and completely insane. By Thursday, I'd racked up $2,400 in fines plus legal fees that were bleeding my retirement dry. Sitting on my dock that evening with Dorothy's photo, watching the sunset paint the water her favorite gold and orange, I wondered if maybe I was too old for this fight. Then Beth called, with information that made my electrician brain start connecting circuits in dangerous ways. "Garrett, I've been digging into Meredith's background. Her husband Raymond runs Aquavest Properties. They specialize in buying distressed lakefront properties and developing luxury communities." The short circuit in my brain finally sparked. Properties like mine? Properties where owners face legal troubles, financial pressure, systematic harassment that makes them desperate to sell. Aquavest offers quick cash, then demolishes everything for high-end development. I remembered reading about this scam in my union newsletter, developers using regulatory pressure to force out longtime residents, then swooping in with below-market offers to help people escape their problems. "There's more," Beth continued. "I found preliminary permits for Willowbrook Lake's Phase 2 expansion. Guess whose property is marked as the future clubhouse location? Mine. They weren't just harassing me for fun, they had a business plan. That weekend, I learned exactly how dirty they were willing to fight. Saturday morning, my boat motor died after 30 seconds. The engine sputtered and choked like it was drowning. When I opened the gas tank, the sweet chemical smell mixed with gasoline told me everything I needed to know. Sugar, classic Sabotage, and expensive as hell to fix. The repair estimate hit $1,800. New fuel system, complete engine overhaul. My security camera had caught a dark figure near the dock around 2 a.m., but the image was too blurry for identification. Didn't matter. I knew exactly who'd ordered this hit. But here's where Meredith made her first real mistake. Monday's emergency HOA meeting was supposed to be my trial. I'd planned to present evidence of the Aquavest connection, the systematic targeting, the pattern of harassment designed to steal my property. Instead, I walked into a room where she'd already poisoned the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen," Meredith announced to the packed community center, "we're addressing a serious threat to neighborhood safety. Mr. Mills has escalated from non-compliance to making threatening statements against board members." She played edited recordings of our conversations, carefully clipped to make me sound like an angry old man threatening violence. Photos of my deteriorating property filled her PowerPoint, making my modest cabin look like a condemned crack house. The vote was swift: $5,000 in total fines, plus a property lien if violations weren't corrected within 30 days. But as I watched neighbors I'd known for decades vote to financially destroy me, something unexpected happened. Sarah Mitchell, a teacher who'd moved here 5 years ago, stood up during the comment period. "Excuse me, but has anyone actually verified these inspection reports, because I've been documenting similar harassment of my family over our children's playground equipment?" Then Tom Bradley, an Iraq veteran, raised his hand. "I've got citation notices for displaying an American flag that apparently violates aesthetic standards. Anyone else notice these fines only hit certain types of residents?" Frank Lucy's daughter pulled out her phone and started reading HOA financial records she'd copied at work. "Did everyone know we've spent $89,000 in legal fees this year, all paid to firms owned by Raymond Blackstone's business partners?" The room erupted. Residents demanding answers, board members stammering excuses. Meredith's carefully orchestrated show trial turning into a public expose of her corruption. But the real surprise came from Harold Epstein, the 78-year-old Purple Heart recipient she'd targeted first. "Folks, I've been researching property law since they came after my hummingbird feeders," Harold announced. "Turns out some of us old-timers have legal rights that predate this whole HOA circus. Rights they can't touch, no matter how many lawyers they hire." As chaos erupted around Meredith's collapsing narrative, I realized something important. I wasn't fighting this battle alone anymore. And sometimes, when enough people get angry at the same corruption, that's when the real power starts to shift. The smell of fear in that overheated community center was better than any morning coffee I'd ever tasted. The community uprising at that meeting rattled Meredith more than I'd expected. Within 48 hours, she launched a scorched earth campaign designed to destroy my reputation before our coalition could organize. The local newspaper's front page hit like a sucker punch. "Dangerous property owner threatens community safety." My weathered cabin photographed next to a pristine McMansion, making me look like the neighborhood cancer that needed cutting out. But the real knife came through social media. Meredith's Willowbrook Community Safety Facebook group exploded overnight with manufactured outrage. Photos of my hazardous dock, warnings about the unstable elderly man threatening children, demands for immediate HOA action. The comments multiplied like a virus, new residents sharing fabricated horror stories, demanding I be removed before someone gets hurt. What Frank's tech-savvy grandson discovered later made my blood boil. Half the most aggressive posts came from fake accounts, all created from Meredith's home IP address. She wasn't just fighting dirty, she was fighting with imaginary armies. The digital warfare escalated to physical intimidation. Tuesday morning, trash scattered across my lawn like confetti from hell. Wednesday, terrorist spray-painted across my dock in blood-red letters. Thursday, anonymous calls with gravelly threats about accidents that could happen to stubborn old men. The smell of spray paint lingered for days, a chemical reminder that someone wanted me gone badly enough to risk felony charges. My daughter Jennifer called from Phoenix, voice tight with worry. "Dad, I'm seeing news articles, social media posts calling you dangerous. Maybe it's time to consider..." "Consider what? Letting some Seattle lawyer steal everything your mother and I built? Consider that this fight might kill you." For a moment, sitting in my kitchen surrounded by 30 years of Dorothy's touch, her coffee mugs, her fishing photos, her handwritten notes still on the refrigerator, I almost broke. Then Beth knocked on my door with a manila folder that changed the entire game. "Remember my old job with County Legal Aid?" she said, spreading documents across my table. "I still have research access, and honey, did I strike gold." The complete ownership chain for our lake, dating back to 1961 when Cascade Lumber created the reservoir. The company donated the lake to the community in 1987, but the donation came with strings attached, a restrictive covenant requiring perpetual recreational access for original property owners. "That's lawyer talk for forever," Beth explained. "But this is the really interesting part." She produced my 1994 property survey, pointing to boundaries I'd never paid attention to. My lot didn't just touch the lake, it included the original creek bed that fed the entire reservoir. "Garrett, you're not just a lakefront property owner, you're the senior riparian owner with legal authority over water levels, dam operations, and access control." The implications hit like lightning. I didn't just live on their precious lake. I owned the water that made their million-dollar properties worth anything. But the real bombshell came when I called Buck Morrison for a dam inspection. "Jesus Christ, Garrett," Buck muttered, examining corroded gate mechanisms and blocked spillways. "This thing hasn't had proper maintenance in years. The HOA was supposed to do annual safety checks, but I don't see any records since 2019. According to state regulations, dam maintenance responsibility belonged to the primary riparian property owner. The same HOA that had been citing me for imaginary violations had been ignoring real safety requirements that could trigger massive liability. Buck, hypothetically, if someone needed emergency maintenance that required lowering water levels?" He showed me the manual gate wheel. "Turn this baby counterclockwise, lake drops 6 feet in about 72 hours, but you'd need environmental justification and proper notifications." As Buck explained the legal requirements, the perfect trap crystallized in my mind. Meredith's neglect of actual safety regulations had created legitimate grounds for emergency water management, and as senior riparian owner, I had the authority and legal obligation to act. But then came the twist I never saw coming. Saturday evening, while reviewing dam maintenance protocols, my security camera caught something that made my hands shake. Meredith and two men in coveralls approaching the dam at 11 p.m. carrying what looked like steel rods and a bag of concrete mix. They weren't just trying to harass me anymore. They were planning to sabotage the dam mechanism, jam the gates so I couldn't operate them even if I had legal authority. Sunday morning, I called Sheriff Martinez with the video evidence. What he told me made my stomach drop. "Mr. Mills, we arrested those men last night. One of them's already talking. Meredith hired Riley Construction to permanently disable your dam controls. She was going to claim you damaged them yourself, then use that as grounds for a restraining order. The woman wasn't just evil, she was criminally stupid. By trying to sabotage my legal authority over the dam, she'd handed me ironclad proof of conspiracy and given me emergency justification for immediate action. Time to show Meredith what happens when you try to cut the wrong wires." Sheriff Martinez's call came at 6 a.m. Sunday. "Mr. Mills, you need to get down here now. The Riley Construction boys are singing like canaries." At the sheriff's station, Martinez spread evidence across the interview table that made my blood run cold. Text messages, financial records, recorded phone calls, a conspiracy so massive it took my breath away. "Meredith and Raymond have been planning this for 2 years, Martinez said. "Every HOA rule, every fine, every harassment campaign, all designed to force property sales to Aquavest at below-market prices." The scope was staggering. 47 lakefront properties acquired through manufactured crises, elderly residents driven out by unaffordable insurance requirements, veterans fined into bankruptcy for displaying American flags. But the text message that made my hand shake was dated 3 months ago. Phase 2 requires all original owners gone by summer, whatever it takes. The lakefront clubhouse site is non-negotiable. They'd marked my property for demolition before they'd even started harassing me. "There's something else," Martinez said, his voice grim. "We found Meredith's backup plan." He pulled out a manila folder stamped "Confidential County Planning." "She's been working with 3 county commissioners to condemn your property through eminent domain. Claims your dock poses environmental hazards that threaten public safety." My stomach dropped. "How close?" "The vote's Tuesday. If it passes, the county can force a sale within 30 days. 3 days. I had 3 days before they could legally steal everything. But as I stared at those damning documents, something else caught my eye. A geological survey from 1961, buried in the property files, that made my electrician brain start connecting circuits in ways Meredith never imagined. The original Cascade Lumber Dam wasn't just built on my property. The entire water control system was legally part of my lot. Every gate, every spillway, every mechanism that kept Willowbrook Lakes from becoming Willowbrook Mud Pit. "Martinez," I said slowly, "what happens if someone owns the infrastructure that supports an entire community's property values?" He followed my pointing finger to the survey boundaries. "Jesus Christ. You don't just have water rights. You own the actual dam." That afternoon, Buck Morrison arrived with his Army Corps engineering manuals and a grin that scared me. "Garrett, after Saturday's sabotage attempt, you've got legal grounds for immediate emergency maintenance. State regulations are crystal clear. When dam security is compromised, the property owner has authority to take whatever actions necessary to protect downstream areas." "Actions like what?" "Controlled water release. Drop the lake level to inspect for structural damage, remove debris, test all mechanical systems." His grin widened. "Standard procedure after suspected sabotage is a complete drawdown, 6 to 8 feet minimum." The implications hit like lightning. Every boat dock would be useless. Every lakefront property would lose its primary selling point. Every Aquavest development plan would become worthless mud. How long for natural refill if I close the gates afterward? 4 to 6 months. Long enough to kill every property sale, every development contract, every mortgage that depends on lake access. As Buck explained the technical requirements, I realized Meredith had made the perfect mistake. Her criminal conspiracy had created legitimate emergency conditions that justified using my nuclear option. But the real revelation came when Beth arrived with one final document: the original 1987 lake donation agreement. Garrett, there's a clause here about water level maintenance. If the lake is ever drawn down for more than 60 days, all Aquavest's development permits automatically expire. They'd have to restart the entire approval process. 2 years of planning, millions in investment, 47 stolen properties, all dependent on keeping water in a lake I controlled. The sound of evening water lapping against my dock suddenly sounded like countdown music. Tuesday morning, Meredith would try to steal my home through eminent domain. Monday morning, I'd pull the plug on her entire world. Monday morning, 5:30 a.m., while Meredith was probably celebrating her upcoming eminent domain victory, I was standing knee-deep in morning mist at the dam, learning how to destroy her world. Emergency dam maintenance is like performing surgery, Buck said, his calloused hands guiding mine on the gate wheel. One wrong move and you're liable for every flooded basement from here to the county line, but do it right, and you're a hero protecting public safety. The cold metal felt like a weapon in my hands as Buck explained the procedure. Turn counterclockwise 1/4 rotation every hour. The lake would drop 18 inches by evening, 6 feet by Thursday morning. Deep enough to strand every boat dock, shallow enough to avoid environmental lawsuits. I remembered a case from my union days where a hydroelectric worker saved an entire town by manually operating floodgates during a storm. Same principle here. Legitimate emergency authority trumps all other legal considerations. The paperwork is your armor, Beth said, arriving with a stack of forms that could choke a lawyer. State Water Resources Board, Environmental Protection Agency, County Emergency Management. Every bureaucrat gets proper notification. We filed Form ENV 247, Emergency Dam Maintenance due to security breach. The sabotage attempt gave me ironclad justification for immediate action. Saturday's criminal conspiracy had become Monday's legal cover. While Buck handled engineering, I coordinated the intelligence network that had grown around my resistance. Harold monitored HOA communications through his daughter's copy center job. Rosa tracked property sales through realtor connections. Frank's grandson maintained digital surveillance of Meredith's social media warfare. She's planning something big for tomorrow, Harold reported, studying intercepted emails. Emergency meeting scheduled right after the eminent domain vote. Agenda item: immediate action against non-compliant properties. The timing crystallized perfectly. Tuesday afternoon, county commissioners would vote on condemning my property. That same morning, I begin maintenance operations that would make my property the only thing preventing economic disaster for the entire community. By the time their meeting ends, Beth calculated, your lake will be down 2 feet and dropping fast. Hard to condemn a man when you need him to save everyone's property values. The afternoon brought unexpected reinforcements. Sarah Mitchell arrived with news that transformed my lonely battle into something bigger. Garrett, we've organized a community defense network. 12 families willing to publicly support your dam maintenance operations. Tom Bradley's got veterans groups interested. My husband's environmental law clinic is providing pro bono legal backup. The coalition included people I'd never expected. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the pediatrician whose lakefront house was worth $900,000, had researched property law after receiving her first harassment notice. I'll testify that proper dam maintenance protects all our investments, she volunteered. Even some newer residents were joining our resistance. Mike Torres, a software engineer who'd paid $750,000 for his weekend cabin, discovered Aquavest had tried to buy his lot 3 times through intermediaries. If they want to fight, they'll get one. The technical preparation felt like loading a weapon. I installed additional security cameras around the dam, ensuring every action would be documented from multiple angles. The whir of digital surveillance sounded like electronic insurance against future lawsuits. Buck and I tested the gate mechanism one final time. Years of neglect had corroded some components, but the basic operation remained sound. The rumble of water through the spillway grew louder as we experimented with flow rates. Remember the golden rule of dam operations, Buck said, adjusting the wheel with practiced precision. Gradual changes prevent accusations of reckless endangerment. Emergency maintenance requires deliberate, documented procedures. The environmental justification was bulletproof. Invasive mussels required population control. Sediment buildup needed removal. Saturday's sabotage attempt demanded complete inspection of underwater mechanisms. Every reason was legitimate. Every procedure was standard. I'd even arranged media coverage. Patricia Vance planned to document the emergency restoration project as part of her ongoing HOA corruption investigation. What Meredith intended as my public destruction would become her public humiliation. The psychological timing was perfect. Tuesday's dam maintenance coincided with the annual lakefront barbecue. 200 residents would watch their water paradise disappear while news cameras captured every reaction. Monday evening, I called Jennifer in Phoenix one last time. "Dad, what if this backfires? What if they find a way to stop you?" "Honey, your mother always said that David didn't beat Goliath by playing it safe. Sometimes protecting your home means risking everything you've built." As darkness settled over the lake, I walked the shoreline one final time, breathing the smell of cedar and night-blooming water lilies that Dorothy had loved. The gentle sound of waves against my dock would change tomorrow, from peaceful lapping to the urgent rush of water escaping toward freedom. In 12 hours, I'd either save our community from predatory developers or destroy the property values of 200 neighbors. Either way, Meredith Blackstone was about to learn what happens when you threaten a man who controls the source of your power. The dam gates were ready, the paperwork was filed, the coalition was mobilized. Time to pull the plug. Tuesday morning, 6 a.m. I turned the dam gate wheel 1/4 rotation and listened to the sound of Meredith's empire beginning to crumble. The increased water flow through the spillway started subtly, just a slightly stronger current, a deeper rumble from the release channel. But within 2 hours, the effects became visible. Boat docks that had floated easily the night before now scraped against their pilings with each wave. By 8 a.m., my phone started ringing. "Garrett, what the hell is happening to the lake?" It was Mike Torres, the software engineer from our coalition. "My neighbor's freaking out because his boat lift is hitting bottom." "Emergency dam maintenance," I replied calmly, sipping coffee on my dock while watching the water level drop inch by inch. "State regulations require immediate inspection after Saturday's sabotage attempt." The panic spread faster than I'd anticipated. Marina owner Bill Henderson called the sheriff's department at 8:30 reporting suspicious activity at the dam site. 3 boat owners showed up at my property demanding explanations. A realtor trying to show the $1 million Fairway Drive property called her client to cancel after discovering the dock was unusable. But the real fireworks started when Meredith arrived at 9:15 a.m. She screeched into my driveway in her white Tesla, designer heels clicking angrily across the gravel like machine gun fire. Her face was flushed with rage and panic as she discovered what 2 hours of water release had accomplished. "You senile old fool!" she screamed, pointing at the dropping lake level. "Do you have any idea what you've done? I'll have you arrested for terrorism." "Morning, Meredith," I replied, holding up my stamped environmental permits. "Just following state regulations for emergency dam maintenance, all properly documented and legally authorized." She snatched the papers, scanning them with the desperate intensity of someone watching their life's work dissolve. "This is sabotage. You're destroying millions of dollars in property values." "I'm protecting public safety. Your husband's buddies tried to disable these gates Saturday night. State law requires immediate structural inspection after suspected tampering." The sound of her phone buzzing interrupted our conversation. Raymond, probably, getting frantic calls from Aquavest investors watching their lakefront development plans turn into mud pie fantasies. By 10 a.m., the lake had dropped 8 inches. Boat owners gathered at the marina like refugees, staring at vessels that couldn't launch. The smell of exposed lakebed, rotting vegetation, and stranded fish began drifting across the water. Meredith's desperation escalated to criminal stupidity. At 10:30, she arrived with 2 men I recognized from Saturday's surveillance footage, Riley construction workers who'd tried to sabotage my dam controls. They carried bolt cutters and what looked like concrete mix, apparently planning to finish the job in broad daylight. "Ma'am, you need to step away from that equipment," Deputy Martinez announced, emerging from the tree line with backup officers. We'd coordinated his surveillance in advance, knowing Meredith would eventually attempt something desperate. "This is legitimate repair work," Meredith protested as the officers confiscated the bolt cutters. "This man is committing economic terrorism." "This man has proper permits for emergency maintenance," Martinez replied. "You have arrest warrants for conspiracy and attempted sabotage." The handcuffs clicking around Meredith's wrists sounded sweeter than any morning birdsong I'd ever heard. But even from the back of a patrol car, she managed one final threat, The eminent domain vote happens at 2 p.m. You'll lose this property whether you flood the lake or not. As the police cars disappeared down my driveway, I realized the real battle was just beginning. Meredith might be temporarily neutralized, but her political connections were still active. The county commissioners would vote in 4 hours, possibly stripping away my legal authority to continue dam operations. That's when Sarah Mitchell arrived with news that changed everything. Garrett, Channel 7 is setting up for live coverage of the eminent domain meeting. Patricia convinced them this is a David versus Goliath story about property rights and developer corruption. The media attention was perfect timing. By 2 p.m., when commissioners gathered to vote on condemning my property, the lake would be down nearly 3 feet. Every news camera would capture the visual evidence of my power over their precious community. There's more, Sarah continued. Dr. Walsh analyzed the Aquavest financial documents Frank's daughter copied. They've borrowed $12 million against expected property acquisitions. If Phase 2 development gets delayed by environmental concerns, the whole company could collapse. As afternoon approached, boat owners stood helplessly on unusable docks while their property values evaporated with each inch of water I released. The sound of hulls scraping concrete and frustrated voices carried across the shrinking lake like a symphony of consequences. At 1:30 p.m., I received a call that made me smile for the first time in weeks. Mr. Mills, this is Commissioner Janet Walsh. Could you possibly delay your dam maintenance until after this afternoon's meeting? We're getting calls from very concerned lakefront property owners. Sorry, Commissioner. State emergency protocols don't allow delays once maintenance operations begin. Safety first, you understand. The irony was delicious. They were begging me to stop the very process their eminent domain vote was supposed to make irrelevant. Time to see if they'd condemn a man whose cooperation they desperately needed. By Wednesday morning, the lake had dropped 4 feet. What started as minor inconvenience had become full-scale community panic. I stood on my dock, now towering above the waterline like a wooden watchtower, drinking coffee and watching chaos unfold across Willowbrook Lakes. 43 boats sat stranded in mud like beached whales. The marina's launch ramp ended in empty air 3 feet above the waterline. Expensive docks designed for easy lake access now looked like diving platforms into a swamp. The smell of exposed lake bottom drifted across the community, rotting vegetation, stranded fish, and 30 years of accumulated sediment baking in the morning sun. It was the smell of consequences. My phone hadn't stopped ringing since 6 a.m. Panicked property owners, furious realtors, desperate boat dealers trying to salvage weekend sales. Every conversation followed the same pattern. Outrage, threats, then pleading when they realized I held all the cards. Mr. Mills, this is Janet Richardson from Lakefront Realty. I've got a client flying in from California to see the Sanderson property. Is there any way you could pause this maintenance until Monday? Sorry, ma'am. Emergency protocols require continuous operation until structural integrity is confirmed. The Sanderson house was $1. $2 million lakefront showcase that looked like $1 million mudfront disaster with their dock sitting high and dry. No lake access meant no sale, no commission, and no happy clients from California. But the real entertainment came from watching Meredith's allies scramble to distance themselves from her sinking ship. Raymond Blackstone held a press conference at 9 a.m., claiming he'd been completely unaware of his wife's HOA activities. Aquavest Properties issued statements about reevaluating development timelines pending resolution of infrastructure concerns. The same commissioners who'd planned to vote for eminent domain yesterday were now calling for collaborative solutions that protect both property rights and community interests. Politicians fleeing a scandal sounded like rats abandoning a burning warehouse. The afternoon brought my favorite visitor, Marcus Finley, the HOA attorney who'd been feeding inside information to Aquavest while billing the community $450 per hour. Garrett, he said, trying to sound friendly while sweat beaded on his forehead. Surely we can reach some reasonable accommodation here. The community is willing to drop all outstanding fines in exchange for immediate lake restoration. I gestured toward the exposed mudflat where million-dollar boats sat like toys forgotten in a sandbox. Marcus, I'm following state emergency protocols. You wouldn't want me to violate environmental regulations, would you? But the economic damage, property values are collapsing every hour this continues. Funny how property values suddenly matter when they're your clients losing money instead of mine. His desperation was palpable. Aquavest's entire business model depended on maintaining artificial property pressure through manufactured crises. Now that I'd created a real crisis they couldn't control, their whole conspiracy was unraveling. Thursday morning brought the community meeting I'd been waiting for. The school gymnasium was packed beyond capacity. 300 residents, news crews from 4 stations, and enough anger to power the entire county. What had started as an emergency HOA session had become a public tribunal. The visual impact was devastating. Through the gymnasium windows, everyone could see the ecological disaster that had been Willowbrook Lakes. Exposed mudflats stretched across acres where water had sparkled just days before. Boat docks jutted into empty air like broken fingers. The community's crown jewel had become an environmental wasteland. But instead of directing their rage at me, something unexpected happened. Tom Bradley, the Iraq veteran, stood up during public comments with a stack of papers that made several board members visibly pale. "Before we discuss lake restoration," Tom announced, "people need to understand how we got here. These are financial records showing systematic HOA corruption dating back 2 years. What followed was a public autopsy of Meredith's conspiracy, shell company payments, kickback schemes, manufactured violations designed to force property sales, every dirty detail exposed under television lights while the community's anger shifted from me to the real criminals. Dr. Walsh presented evidence of targeted harassment against veterans, minorities, and senior citizens. Frank Lucy's daughter read text messages proving premeditated property theft. Sarah Mitchell displayed photos of manufactured violations and fabricated safety concerns. By the time Patricia Vance finished explaining Aquavest's loan obligations and development timeline, the crowd was calling for criminal investigations, not lake restoration. But the moment that made my heart sing came when Harold Epstein, the 78-year-old Purple Heart recipient, addressed the crowd. "Folks, I've been thinking about this lake situation while watching my hummingbird feeders, the ones they fined me for having. And you know what? Sometimes when something's broken so bad that fixing it means taking it apart completely, maybe that's exactly what needs to happen." The applause was thunderous. A World War II veteran had just endorsed burning down the whole system to save it. As I watched 300 people demand justice instead of restoration, I realized something beautiful. Meredith's greed had finally created the community unity she'd spent 2 years trying to destroy. The smell of exposed lake mud was starting to smell like victory. Friday afternoon, the Willowbrook Community Center was standing room only. 350 residents, 5 news crews, county officials, and enough rage to burn down half of Seattle. The emergency meeting that was supposed to pressure me into restoring the lake had become something else entirely, a public trial for systematic corruption. I walked into that packed room like a man holding royal flush while everyone else argued over pocket change. 4 days of controlled lake drainage had reduced Willowbrook Lakes to Willowbrook Swamp, and every property value had cratered along with the water level. But the crowd wasn't looking at me with hatred anymore. They were staring at the empty chairs where the HOA board used to sit. Meredith was still in county lockup on conspiracy charges. Raymond had fled to Seattle to avoid process servers. Marcus Finley was suspended from the state bar pending ethics violations. The corruption investigation had decapitated their entire operation. County Commissioner Janet Walsh called the meeting to order, her voice tight with political panic. "We're here to discuss emergency restoration of lake levels and compensation for affected property owners." That's when Tom Bradley stood up with a microphone and a manila folder that made several officials fidget nervously. "Commissioner Walsh, before we talk restoration, I think folks need to understand exactly how their property values got destroyed." What followed was a public execution of everything Meredith had built. Tom read text messages proving systematic harassment of veterans. Dr. Walsh presented medical documentation of stress-related health problems caused by HOA targeting. Frank Lucy's financial analysis showed $340,000 in community funds embezzled through fake legal fees and kickback schemes. But the moment that made the room explode came when Sarah Mitchell stood at the microphone holding a stack of property deeds. "These are purchase agreements Aquavest had prepared for 47 lakefront properties," she announced. "Every targeted family in this room was pre-selected for forced buyouts at 60% of market value." The crowd erupted, shouting, cursing, demands for arrests and prosecutions. 300 people discovering they'd been marked for financial assassination by the woman they'd elected to protect their community. Commissioner Walsh banged her gavel desperately. "Order, we need to focus on practical solutions." "Solutions? Harold Epstein's voice cut through the chaos like a rusty sword. The 78-year-old veteran stood slowly, leaning on his walker, and the room fell silent out of pure respect. "Commissioner, I've been thinking about practical solutions while watching my property value disappear along with that lake. And you know what solution makes sense to me?" He turned to face the crowd, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd survived Normandy Beach. "I think we should thank Garrett Mills for showing us what this community really looks like when you strip away all the fancy pretenses and million-dollar lies." The silence was deafening. "See that empty lake out there? That's not environmental damage, that's truth. For 2 years, a bunch of Seattle lawyers and developers have been stealing our homes, our dignity, and our community, and we let them do it because we were afraid of losing our property values." Harold's voice grew stronger with each sentence. "Well, our property values are gone now. Our fancy lakefront paradise is officially ruined. And you know what? I feel free for the first time in years." The applause started slowly, then built like a thunderstorm. "So here's my practical solution, Commissioner Walsh. We keep that lake empty until every stolen property is returned, every illegal fine is refunded, and every criminal involved in this conspiracy is behind bars where they belong." The roar of approval shook the building's windows. Commissioner Walsh looked like she'd swallowed broken glass. "Mr. Epstein, the economic damage was done when you people let criminals run our community for 2 years, Harold shot back. "Garrett Mills didn't destroy our property values. He exposed the thieves who'd already stolen them." That's when I finally stood up. The room went dead quiet as I walked to the microphone, feeling 350 pairs of eyes tracking my movement. News cameras swiveled to capture every word. "Folks," I said, my voice carrying across the silent room, "I didn't drain this lake to hurt anyone. I did it because sometimes when something's poisoned all the way through, the only cure is to flush out the system and start over." I paused, looking out at faces that had transformed from anger to understanding. Harold's right. That empty lake is the truth. It's what happens when you let predators disguised as neighbors steal everything you've worked for. The silence stretched like a held breath. "The lake will refill when the corruption is gone, when the stolen properties are returned, when this community decides it wants to be a community again instead of a hunting ground for developers." I set the microphone down and walked toward the exit. "Until then, enjoy the view. It's the most honest thing you've seen here in years." The explosion of applause followed me all the way to my truck. 6 months later, I'm sitting on my dock again, watching the sunrise paint the restored lake in gold and orange, Dorothy's favorite colors. The water level returned to normal in March after the last Aquavest property was returned to its original owner and the final corruption charges were filed. Willowbrook Lakes looks different now, better. Sarah Mitchell is our new HOA president, elected unanimously after running on a platform of transparency and respect for original residents. Our monthly meetings actually happen monthly, with public financial reports and no surprise rule changes designed to force anyone out. The marina reopened under community management, with Harold Epstein as harbor master. Watching a 79-year-old Purple Heart recipient direct boat traffic from his motorized wheelchair makes me smile every morning. His hummingbird feeders, all 14 of them now, have become a neighborhood attraction that nobody dares fine. Rosa Martinez expanded her vegetable garden and started a community farmers market every Saturday. Her tomatoes and peppers, grown with 3 generations of family knowledge, are the most popular items. The new residents actually ask for her grandmother's recipes now, instead of calling her garden a non-conforming land use. The criminal prosecutions wrapped up in April. Meredith got 6 years for conspiracy, fraud, and bribery. Raymond received 4 years plus restitution orders that bankrupted Aquavest completely. Marcus Finley was disbarred and ordered to pay $340,000 to cover the legal fees he'd stolen from our community. But the real victory isn't about punishment, it's about what we built from the ruins. The Dorothy Mills Environmental Scholarship Fund, established with proceeds from the Netflix documentary about our lake war, provides $45,000 annually for local students pursuing conservation careers. 3 high school graduates each year get full college funding to study environmental protection, water management, or sustainable development. Jennifer flies up from Phoenix every month now, bringing my grandchildren to fish from the same dock where their grandmother and I spent 27 years of Sunday mornings. Watching 8-year-old Tommy cast his line into water that almost disappeared forever reminds me why some fights are worth everything you've got. The annual Lake Festival happens Memorial Day weekend. Fishing tournaments, live music, environmental education booths, and a special ceremony honoring veterans and original families. This year, we raised $28,000 for lake conservation projects and programs supporting senior residents facing housing pressure. Property values stabilized at fair market rates without the artificial inflation from speculative development. New families move in regularly, but they're people who want to join a community instead of replacing it. The Riverside County HOA Transparency Act, inspired by our case, now requires public financial audits and prohibits board members from having business relationships with vendors. Dr. Walsh still lives in her $900,000 house, but now she volunteers at our monthly legal clinic helping other communities fight predatory HOA practices. Tom Bradley runs a veterans advocacy program that's spread to 4 counties. Frank Lucy started a financial literacy workshop that teaches senior citizens how to recognize and resist harassment campaigns. The lake itself is healthier than it's been in decades. The controlled drawdown allowed us to remove invasive species, clean sediment buildup, and restore native fish populations. The University of Washington now uses Willowbrook Lakes as a research site for studying ecosystem restoration techniques. Some mornings, when the mist rises off the water and the loons call across the quiet surface, I swear I can feel Dorothy sitting beside me on this dock. She'd love seeing how our little community learned to fight for itself. "You did good, old man," I tell her photo, the same one I carried through 4 months of legal battles and community healing. You would have been proud of how these folks stood up for each other. The sound of children laughing at the marina reminds me that this was never really about property rights or water levels or even justice. It was about whether ordinary people could protect the places they love from those who see homes as just another commodity to exploit. Next week, I start speaking at a property rights conference in Oregon. The month after that, it's a community organizing workshop in Colorado. Patricia's book about our story comes out in September, and 3 more documentary crews want interviews. But every morning, I'm still here at sunrise with my coffee and fishing rod, talking to Dorothy and watching the lake she loved come alive with another day.
You know, Garrett's story, it really comes down to that moment when Meredith handed him that $500 fine for fishing at his own dock. She thought she was dealing with just another senior citizen who folded under pressure. But here's what people like Meredith never understand. When you've been an electrician for 40 years, you develop this habit of chasing problems back to the source. Most people would have just paid the fine, maybe hired a lawyer to argue about fishing regulations. Garrett went to the county recorder's office instead, started reading those water rights documents from 1994, found out he didn't just live on the lake, he controlled it. That's the thing about HOA situations. The power dynamic feels so overwhelming at first. Board members with law degrees, stacks of bylaws, property management companies. It's all designed to make you feel small. But sometimes the person being targeted actually holds more cards than anyone realized. They just need to take the time to find them. I'm curious, how many of you have found yourself in similar situations? Maybe not with damn control, but moments where you realize the people trying to intimidate you hadn't done their homework? If this resonated with you, if you got your own HOA stories, hit that subscribe button. There's a more situation like Garrett's out there, more than you might think.